Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. You, of course, had a very personal experience on the day of the attack. Can you just talk me through what happened and how you went through it? Okay.
The synagogue is close to me. It's one that I've been to many times. Recently, one of the survivors of Hamas captivity, al-Shamie, whose entire family were murdered on October the 7th, and he was held in appalling conditions for close to 600 days. He spoke at that synagogue to our community. I heard quite early on in a different life. I used to teach security at the Community Security Trust. So I'm part of my synagogue security team, so I rushed there so that we could secure the building until the police arrived, because we were, of course, worried about copycat attacks, or we didn't know what the extent of this was going to be. I've been doing security outside synagogues for 31 years as a volunteer since I was 16, and we've never felt entirely safe. But in the past, we were worried about, drunk right-wing thugs. It's changed a lot. And listening to your news report earlier, I can tell you one thing. This was not a lone wolf attack. Lone wolves don't exist. There's an entire terror network behind them. Those who indoctrinate, those who support, those who make videos saying how to carry out attacks. There was a whole network behind this man. The attack was inevitable. It was inevitable. 2 Jews were hunted at prayer in a synagogue. Adrian Dolby, Melvin Kravitz were murdered. We knew it was coming. Why do I say that? I say it because you can't generate such levels of hate and disinformation against a minority and not expect this. And when we see terms of international law, such as genocide, the most serious accusation there is, misused and twisted and thrown around with abandon, when the correct definition of law doesn't apply to that, and it's used and targeted at the only Jewish state in the world, it's going to cause hatred. Online conspiracy theorists, Cadence Owens and friends, and influencers, pushing unhinged anti-Semitism to huge audiences. We have universities, many of whom are getting funding from Qatar. I think somewhat close to 52 British universities, maybe more, have had funding from Qatar, a major sponsor of world terror, employing lecturers who promote not just biased and academically dubious material against Israel, but often cross the line into crystal clear anti-Semitism. David Miller at Bristol University. And those chanting death to the IDF in Glastonbury is something that looked like a Nuremberg rally, and join the hate marches which have plagued our streets. They all propagate this petri dish of hatred, which culminated in the anti-Semitic murders on Yom Kippur. And on those hate marches, let's talk about these calls to globalise the Intifada. Now, I was in Israel. I lived in Israel during the second Intifada, when suicide bombers were blowing up buses and cafes on a regular basis. It was scary to get a bus. Globalising the Intifada, this is what it looks like. It looked like the Bataclan attack in Paris in 2015, where 130 people were killed, or the Mumbai attacks in 2008, I think it was 166 killed, or closer to home, the 7/7 bombings, 52 civilians murdered, or the Manchester Arena bomb, when 22 young people went to a concert and lost their lives to jihad. Interestingly, the name of the attacker given to him by his father, who the Telegraph have reported celebrated the October the 7th attacks. That's what globalise the Intifada means, and that's what we're being heard chanted on so many of these hate marches. Now, sorry.
Daniel, I noted there that you haven't directly called out culpability on behalf of the government for that change in tone amongst the society. How much culpability do you put at the feet of the government?
It's interesting, really, because it's not like there were no warnings. The Jewish community have been begging the government for support. If there's one thing we've learned through 3,700 years of hatred and expulsions and attacks and pogroms, the Holocaust, the Inquisitions, we can sense danger. I'm afraid it's innate. And we've been saying to the government, look, you need to, we all agree in the right to freedom of protest, but that freedom is not absolute. When the calls are stirring up violence, it is lawful to place limits on that, and in fact it's incumbent really on the police and government to do that, and we've been consistently ignored by this government. And rather than listening to us, in fact, what we've seen is this government rewarding the very acts of terror which launched the war in Gaza with this performative, entirely unlawful recognition with the alleged state of Palestine, commit acts of murder, rape, kidnap, get useful idiots in the West to shout loudly enough and you will be rewarded. And let's not forget, Hamas thanked Keir Starmer for that. They congratulated him. So it should come as no surprise that when the Deputy Prime Minister attended yesterday at the site of the murder, his attendance was met with disgust and derision by those who had come to mourn our dead. He was not wanted there. They wanted to mourn. I should add, we've learned who our friends are. I'll say I'm not a member of the Conservative Party, but Kemi Badenoch actually attended a synagogue in North Manchester this morning to be with the community. She got a far warmer welcome. Yeah. Whether or not members share her politics, I've no idea. But she's consistently called for actions to protect Jews and to tackle the hatred and the violent organisations we've faced. But when politicians who are hostile to the only Jewish state, who have ignored consistent pleas from a minority, come to offer platitudes for our dead, well, we know people like to feel sorry for dead Jews, but we prefer those that support us while we're alive. Yeah. The anger David Lammy saw yesterday was real. We're seeing with absolute clarity where our leaders stand. And how sickening was it within hours, I'll add this, and within hours, anti-Jewish racists congregated on the streets to celebrate the murder of Jews.
Daniel, it's Renee. I've lived in a Jewish area, quite a Jewish area, for 35 years. And I think if you don't live in a Jewish area, so you don't see schools and nurseries being accompanied to the park by security guards and with them standing outside all day, you don't really understand the threat that the Jewish community have faced for years. But my friends, and I have many of them, are now more scared than I have ever seen them. And if we look back in history, you mentioned the 3,700 years of Jews being, ghettoised and expelled from everywhere. Are the Jews not the canary in our coal mine that should be waking us up to the problems that face us if we look back in history and see what has happened before when our Jews have been scared?
So it's a commonly said thing that Jews are the canary down the mine. Anti-Semitism is always the sign of a sick society. It's always the sign of something going wrong. It's now broken Britain. And, since Jews were invited back in here by Cromwell 400 years ago, I don't think there have been many occasions when Jews have felt, you will struggle to find many Friday night dinners when Jews sit around with their families on Shabbat dinner and don't talk about where to go. Is it time to leave? And it's terrible because we always felt safe in Britain. It was the country that led the fight against fascism, that resisted communism. And we no longer feel safe. The difference is this, though, and whether people like it or not, I don't care. I know Israel is an unpopular subject, but in some of those incidents I've talked before, the Cossack pogroms, the Nazi Holocaust, the Portuguese and Spanish inquisitions, Israel didn't exist. We now have somewhere where we can go. We know we'll be safe, and the word Jew is not a defamation.